My name is Lloyd, and at 57 years old, I thought I knew what family meant. For 3 decades, Christmas had been our sacred time, the one holiday where nothing else mattered except being together. But this year, my son told us we weren't wanted. Those words cut deeper than any blade ever could. I never imagined I'd hear my own child say, "We don't want you for Christmas." Before we dive into what happened next, I'd love to know where you're watching from. Drop your location in the comments below, and if you've ever felt pushed aside by someone you love, hit that like button and subscribe, because this story is about to show you how we turned our worst holiday into our greatest triumph. Now let me take you back to where it all began. For 32 years, Carol and I built a life that made sense. We met in Denver, Colorado, back when I was 25 and she was 23. I was working construction jobs trying to make a name for myself, and she was a nursing student with dreams of helping people. We fell in love over coffee at a diner that doesn't exist anymore, got married 2 years later in a small ceremony with just our closest friends, and started the kind of life people write songs about. Our son Brandon came along a year after the wedding. He was this tiny thing, barely 7 pounds, with my blue eyes and Carol's stubborn chin. We raised him in the same 3-bedroom house we still live in today, the one with the oak tree in the front yard that's taller than the roof now. I worked my way up in the construction business, eventually becoming an engineer, and Carol spent 28 years at the county hospital before retiring last year. We weren't rich, but we had enough. More importantly, we had each other. Christmas was always our thing. Every single year, without fail, we'd start decorating the first week of December. Brandon and I had this tradition where we'd drive out to Patterson's Tree Farm, about 20 miles outside town, and spend an hour picking the perfect tree. He'd run between the rows of pines and spruces, pointing at ones that were too tall or too crooked, until we found the one that felt right. Carol would have hot chocolate waiting when we got home, and the 3 of us would spend the evening stringing lights and hanging ornaments while old Bing Crosby records played on the turntable. The ornaments told our story. There was the clay handprint Brandon made in kindergarten, the glass snowflake Carol's mother gave us our first Christmas, together the wooden star I carved the year I started my own consulting business. Each one held a memory, and each year we'd unwrap them like treasures and remember. Christmas morning was magic. Even when Brandon got older and stopped believing in Santa, he'd still wake up early, and we'd gather in the living room in our pajamas. I'd make my famous cinnamon rolls. Carol would brew coffee so strong it could wake the dead, and we'd open presents one at a time, savoring each moment. Then we'd have a big breakfast, spend the afternoon visiting neighbors, and end the day with a quiet dinner, just the 3 of us. Those were the best days of my life. I never thought they'd end. But 3 years ago, Brandon met Stephanie through some dating app. She was different from anyone he'd dated before. Stephanie came from money, the kind of money where you summer in the Hamptons and winter in Aspen. Her father owned a chain of luxury hotels, her mother sat on charity boards, and she herself worked in marketing for some big firm in New York. When Brandon first told us about her, I could hear the nervousness in his voice, like he was afraid we wouldn't approve. We tried. Lord knows we tried. When Brandon brought her home for the first time, Carol cleaned the house until it sparkled and made her best roast chicken. I put on a button-down shirt instead of my usual flannel. We wanted to make a good impression. But from the moment Stephanie walked through our door, I could tell she was measuring everything and finding it lacking. She complimented the house, but her tone suggested she was lying. She picked at her dinner, claiming she was watching her carbs. When Carol showed her the photo albums, Stephanie scrolled through her phone instead. The whole evening felt stiff, like we were performers in a play we hadn't rehearsed for. Over the next 2 years, things got worse. They got married in a destination wedding in Cabo that cost more than my first car. Carol and I scraped together the money to attend, but we felt out of place among Stephanie's family and friends, with their designer clothes and easy talk about vacation homes. Brandon seemed happy, though, so we kept our mouths shut. They had 2 kids fast. First came Ethan, a sweet little boy who's 3 now, and then Zoe, who just turned 1. We became grandparents, which should have been wonderful. And it was, except Stephanie made it clear that our way of doing things wasn't good enough. When we bought Ethan a wooden truck like the one Brandon had loved as a kid, Stephanie thanked us, but mentioned they preferred educational toys. When Carol knitted little sweaters for Zoe, Stephanie said the yarn might irritate her sensitive skin. Every visit felt like walking on eggshells. Stephanie would make comments about our furniture being outdated, our neighborhood being too quiet, our food being too heavy. Brandon would get this tight look around his eyes, like he wanted to say something but couldn't. We watched our son disappear into a marriage that seemed to shrink him. Last Christmas was particularly hard. They came to our house on Christmas Eve, arriving 2 hours late, because Stephanie insisted they stop at her parents' place first. They stayed for exactly 90 minutes. Stephanie spent most of that time on her phone, coordinating plans for the next day. Brandon barely looked at us. When they left, citing an early morning with the kids, Carol cried in the kitchen, while I pretended not to notice. This year, I hoped things might be different. November came, and I called Brandon to ask about their Christmas plans. I kept my tone light, casual, not wanting to pressure him. "Hey, son," I said when he picked up. "Your mom and I were wondering what you're thinking for Christmas this year. We'd love to have you and the family here like always." There was a pause. Too long of a pause. Then Brandon said, "We're still figuring things out, Dad. I'll let you know." Something in his voice made my stomach drop. He sounded guilty, evasive. I tried to brush it off. Maybe they were just busy. Young parents get overwhelmed during the holidays. I told myself it was nothing. But as the weeks passed, Brandon kept dodging the question. Carol would text Stephanie asking if she needed help with anything, and Stephanie's responses were brief. "We're good, thanks." No warmth, no details, just a wall. I started to feel anxious. Carol noticed it too. We'd sit at dinner, and she'd say, "Do you think something's wrong?" And I'd say, "No, I'm sure they're just busy." But we were both lying to ourselves. Nothing could have prepared me for the phone call that shattered everything. It was December 10th, a Tuesday evening. Carol and I were on the couch watching some detective show we'd seen 100 times before. The house was quiet except for the television and the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. My phone rang around 7:30. Brandon's name lit up the screen. I answered, genuinely happy to hear from him. "Hey, son. How are you? How are the kids?" "Dad." His voice was strained, tight. "I need to talk to you about Christmas." I felt Carol tense beside me. I put the phone on speaker so she could hear. "Sure, what's up?" He took a breath, the kind of breath people take before they say something they know will hurt. "Look, this is really hard for me to say, but Stephanie and I have been talking. This year, we want to have Christmas just with our immediate family. Just us, the kids and her parents." The words hit me like a truck. I actually had to replay them in my head to make sure I'd heard correctly. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice coming out weaker than I intended. "We are your immediate family." "Dad, you know what I mean." He sounded frustrated now, like I was being difficult. "We want to start our own traditions. Stephanie's parents are flying in from New York, and it's going to be a lot. We just don't have room for everyone." Carol spoke up, her voice shaking. Brandon, we've always spent Christmas together. Always. Since you were born. Mum, I know. Now he sounded defensive. But things change. We have our own family now. We need to do what's best for us. I felt anger rising in my chest, hot and sharp. So what you're saying is you don't want us there. At all. It's not that we don't want you. His words came fast, like he'd rehearsed them. It's just better this way. Less stressful. We can visit some other time. Better for who? I couldn't keep the edge out of my voice. Better for Stephanie. Don't blame Stephanie. Now he was angry. This is our decision. Both of us. Is it? I shot back. Because it sure sounds like you're choosing her parents over your own. I have to go, Dad. His voice went cold. I'm sorry. The line went dead. Carol and I sat there in the silence that followed. The detective show played on people solving crimes and finding justice. But all I could hear was the echo of my son's voice telling us we weren't wanted. Carol started to cry, quiet tears running down her face. I put my arm around her, but I didn't know what to say. What do you say when your only child rejects you? We stayed up late that night, talking in circles. Had we done something wrong? Were we too involved? Too distant? Carol kept asking, what did we do? And I had no answers. We'd loved Brandon, supported him, given him everything we could. And somehow that wasn't enough. The next few days were brutal. I tried calling Brandon twice. Both times he didn't answer. I sent a text, "Can we talk about this?" Hours later, he responded with a single sentence. "There's nothing to talk about, Dad. We made our decision." That hurt worse than the original rejection. He wasn't even willing to discuss it, to explain, to help us understand. He'd just shut the door in our faces and expected us to accept it. Carol stopped sleeping well. I'd wake up at 2 a.m. and find her in the kitchen staring at old photo albums. Pictures of Brandon as a baby, as a toddler, as a teenager. "Where did we lose him?" she'd ask, and I'd have no answer. I thought about Christmas coming. The house would be empty. Just Carol and me, sitting in silence, pretending everything was fine. The thought made me sick. I'd walk past the storage closet, where we kept the decorations, and feel this weight in my chest. Why bother decorating if there was no one to share it with? Our neighbors started asking about our plans. George from next door asked if Brandon was coming home for the holidays. I lied and said yes, not wanting to admit the truth. The shame of it burned. My son didn't want me. What kind of father loses his son? One night, about a week after the phone call, I couldn't sleep. I went down to the living room and just sat in the dark. I thought about all those Christmases, all those mornings with cinnamon rolls and wrapping paper. I thought about teaching Brandon to tie his shoes, to ride a bike, to drive a car. I thought about the day he graduated college, how proud I'd been. And I thought about how none of it seemed to matter now. I felt like I'd failed, not just as a father, but as a person. If your own child doesn't want you around, what does that say about you? It was Carol who saved us. About 10 days before Christmas, I was sitting in the living room staring at the bare spot where the tree should have been. We hadn't decorated. What was the point? Carol came in carrying 2 mugs of coffee and sat down beside me. "We can't do this," she said quietly. "Do what? Spend Christmas like this, sad and alone, feeling sorry for ourselves?" I looked at her. "What else can we do?" Brandon made his choice. She set her coffee down and turned to face me fully. "We make our own choice. He said we should start our own traditions. Fine. Let's do exactly that. Carol, I don't think I can just pretend to be happy. I'm not talking about pretending. Her eyes had a determination I hadn't seen in days. If he doesn't want us, that's his loss. We're going to have Christmas, a real Christmas, maybe even the best Christmas we've ever had. How? We throw a party, invite our friends, the people who actually want to spend time with us. I stared at her. The idea seemed crazy at first, almost spiteful. But as I sat with it, something shifted inside me. Why should we sit here miserable? We had friends, people who cared about us. Why were we acting like Brandon was our whole world? You really want to do this? I asked. Yes. She grabbed my hand. Lloyd, I've spent the last week feeling worthless, feeling like we failed as parents. But you know what? We didn't fail. We loved our son. We gave him everything. If he's choosing to push us away, that's on him. We deserve to be happy. We deserve to celebrate. Something in her words lit a spark in me. She was right. We'd done nothing wrong. And we were choosing to let Brandon's rejection define our entire holiday. That was giving him too much power. Okay, I said. Let's do it. Let's have the best Christmas ever. Carol's face lit up with the first real smile I'd seen in weeks. We spent the rest of that evening making plans. First, we needed to figure out who to invite. We started listing names. George and Patricia from next door. They'd been our neighbors for 15 years, always friendly, always kind. Frank, my college roommate, who lived across town. We saw each other every few months for lunch, and he was always good company. Helen, one of Carol's former co-workers from the hospital, and her husband, David. Carol had mentioned Helen was recently widowed and spending Christmas alone. A few people from church who we'd grown close with over the years. Then Carol had an idea. What about Amber and Jake? The young couple who moved in 2 houses down. I remembered them. Couple in their late 20s, no kids yet, had moved from out of state for work. Do we know them well enough? I ran into Amber at the grocery store last week. She mentioned their families are all in California, and they're spending Christmas alone. They seemed lonely. Invite them, I said. The more I thought about it, the more excited I got. This wouldn't just be a consolation prize. This would be a real celebration. We ended up with a list of about 20 people. The next day I started making calls. I'll never forget the first one to George. I dialed his number, suddenly nervous. What if people thought this was pathetic? George, it's Lloyd. Carol and I are throwing a Christmas party this year. 2 o'clock on Christmas Day. Would you and Patricia like to come? There was a pause, and for a second, I thought he'd say no. Then he laughed. Are you kidding? We'd love to. Patricia and I usually just heat up some frozen dinners and watch TV. This sounds wonderful. Relief flooded through me. One down. I called Frank next. A Christmas party, Frank said. Lloyd. I haven't been to a real Christmas party in years. Count me in. What can I bring? Helen started crying when Carol called her. I've been dreading Christmas, she admitted. Ever since Tom passed, the holidays have been so hard. Thank you for thinking of me. Amber, the young neighbor, sounded almost shocked. Really? You want us there? Oh my gosh, Jake and I were just talking about how homesick we've been. This would mean the world to us. Every single person said yes. Not only that, but they all sounded genuinely excited. It hit me then that maybe we weren't the only ones who'd been feeling lonely. Maybe Christmas was hard for a lot of people. With the guest list set, Carol and I moved into planning mode. She pulled out her recipe books and started mapping out the menu. Roast turkey, because that was tradition. Mashed potatoes with gravy. green bean casserole, her famous cranberry sauce from scratch, rolls, 2 different kinds of stuffing. For dessert, apple pie, pumpkin pie, and her chocolate cake that everyone always asked for. "This is a lot of food," I said, looking at the list. "We're feeding 20 people," Carol said, "and I want it to be perfect." I handled decorations. If we were doing this, we were going all out. I went to 3 different stores buying more lights than we'd ever used before. LED string lights in white and multicolored, icicle lights for the eaves, a new wreath for the front door, bigger and fuller than our old one, extra ornaments for the tree, candles, table runners, everything. The day we went shopping for the tree felt significant. Usually it had been Brandon and me. This year, it was just Carol and me. We drove out to Patterson's, and I felt this weird mixture of sadness and determination. We walked through the rows of trees, and Carol pointed to a massive Douglas fir. "That one," she said. "That's 8 feet tall. It'll barely fit in the living room." "Exactly. Go big or go home, Lloyd." I laughed, really laughed, for the first time in weeks. We bought the biggest tree we'd ever had. Getting it into the house was an adventure. I had to trim a few inches off the trunk, and even then the star barely cleared to the ceiling. But when we stepped back and looked at it, Carol squeezed my hand. "It's perfect," she said. Over the next few days, we decorated with more enthusiasm than I'd felt in years. I strung lights around every window, hung the wreath, put candles on the mantel. Carol arranged fresh pine branches in vases throughout the house. We played Christmas music loud enough that George could probably hear it next door. One evening, as we were hanging ornaments on the giant tree, Carol pulled out her phone. "We should take pictures," she said. "Lots of pictures." I hesitated. "Why?" "To remember this. To show people what we did." I understood what she wasn't saying. To show Brandon. Part of me resisted. It felt petty, like we were trying to make him jealous. But another part of me thought, why shouldn't we document this? We were creating something beautiful. We deserved to share it. "Okay," I said. "Take all the pictures you want." She snapped a photo of me on the ladder hanging a star. I took one of her arranging the nativity scene on the side table. We took a selfie together in front of the tree, our faces close, actually smiling. The truth was, planning this party had given us something Brandon's rejection had taken away purpose. We weren't just sitting around feeling rejected. We were creating joy. We were choosing to be happy, despite everything. Carol had another idea one night as we were wrapping gifts for our guests. Nothing expensive, just little things. A bottle of wine for George and Patricia, a scented candle for Helen, a gift card to a local restaurant for Amber and Jake. "What if we post some of the pictures on Facebook?" Carol asked. I put down the scissors. "You want Brandon to see them?" She didn't deny it. "Is that terrible?" I thought about it. Was it terrible to want your child to know that they couldn't break you, that life went on, that you had people who cared about you, that you weren't just sitting in the dark crying, "No," I said slowly. "It's not terrible. It's honest." Carol nodded. "I don't want to hurt him, but I also don't want to hide. This is our life. We're allowed to be happy." "Then post them," I said. She selected a few photos. One of the decorated house from the outside, lights blazing. One of the tree in all its glory. One of the dining table set with our good china ready for guests. She uploaded them to Facebook with a simple caption, "Getting ready for the best Christmas ever." I watched her hit post, and I felt something I hadn't felt in weeks. Not quite happiness, not yet, but something close to it. Something like hope. The days before Christmas passed in a blur of activity. Carol cooked and baked until the house smelled like cinnamon and roasted meat. I made endless trips to the grocery store, checked and rechecked that we had enough chairs, enough plates, enough everything. On December 23rd, Amber stopped by with a casserole dish. "I made my grandmother's sweet potato casserole," she said shyly. "For the party. I hope that's okay." Carol hugged her. "It's more than okay. It's perfect." George came over too, carrying a bottle of expensive wine. "Patricia's making her famous cheesecake," he announced. "She's been talking about this party non-stop. You've made her whole Christmas." Those words hit me harder than I expected. We'd made her Christmas. By opening our home, by refusing to sit in our sadness, we'd given other people joy. That felt bigger than I'd realized. Christmas Eve arrived. Carol and I didn't sleep well. I kept thinking about Brandon. Was he thinking about us? Did he feel guilty, or was he so wrapped up in Stephanie's family that he'd forgotten we existed? I checked my phone obsessively, hoping maybe he'd call. Maybe he'd changed his mind. Nothing. At midnight, as we lay in bed, Carol whispered, "Are you okay?" "I don't know," I admitted. "Tomorrow's going to be so different." Different doesn't mean bad. I know. It just means not what I expected. She rolled over and looked at me in the darkness. "Lloyd, whatever happens tomorrow, I need you to know something. I'm proud of us. We could have spent this whole month feeling sorry for ourselves. Instead, we chose something better. That takes courage." I kissed her forehead. "I love you, Carol. I love you too." I finally fell asleep around 2 in the morning and woke up at 6. Christmas morning. For the first time in 33 years, Brandon wouldn't be here. That hurt. It genuinely hurt. But I got up, went downstairs, and looked at the house we'd created. The lights twinkling, the tree standing tall, the table set for a feast. This was ours. We'd built this. Carol came down an hour later, and we had our coffee together in the quiet. "Merry Christmas," she said softly. "Merry Christmas, sweetheart." At 8, we started final preparations. The turkey went in the oven. Carol started on the side dishes. I set out drinks, checked the music playlist, made sure the house was warm. By noon, everything was ready. We just had to wait for our guests. At 1:30, I changed into a nice shirt and slacks. Carol put on a red sweater and her good earrings. We looked at each other and smiled. We looked good. We looked happy. The doorbell rang at exactly 2 o'clock. George and Patricia stood on the porch, both of them grinning. "Merry Christmas," Patricia said, handing Carol a beautiful cheesecake. They came inside, and I watched their faces light up at the decorations. "Lloyd, this is incredible," George said. "Your house looks like something out of a magazine." 10 minutes later, Frank arrived, then Helen and David, then Amber and Jake carrying flowers. One by one, our guests filled our home with laughter and warmth. Kids ran around the living room. Adults gathered in the kitchen helping Carol bring out dishes. The house buzzed with life. We ate around 3 o'clock, everyone squeezing around our extended dining table and extra card tables we'd set up. I said grace, thanking God for friends, for food, for second chances. When I looked up, half the table had tears in their eyes. The food was incredible. Carol had outdone herself. People went back for seconds, for thirds. Amber's sweet potato casserole disappeared in minutes. Patricia's cheesecake got demolished. Frank told stories that had everyone laughing until they cried. Helen talked about her late husband and how much he would have loved this gathering. Around 5 o'clock, after we'd eaten and settled into comfortable conversation, Carol suggested taking pictures. "Everyone, let's get a photo in front of the tree." We all crammed together, 20 people pressed close arms around each other. I set up my phone on a tripod and set the timer. We counted down together. 3, 2, 1. Everyone smiled and the camera clicked. We took more photos. Group shots, pairs, families. Carol photographed me carving the turkey. I got a shot of her laughing with Helen. Jake took a picture of all of us raising our glasses in a toast. The joy in those images was real, undeniable. This wasn't a consolation prize. This was genuinely one of the best days of my life. After most of the photos were taken, Carol sat down with her phone and started selecting the best ones. She looked up at me. Should I post them? I didn't hesitate. Yes. She chose about 10 photos. The whole group in front of the tree, everyone beaming. The table loaded with food. Me and her together, her head on my shoulder. The house all lit up. She uploaded them to Facebook with a caption, "Best Christmas ever. So grateful for amazing friends and family who made today unforgettable." She hit post and set down her phone. Within minutes, notifications started coming in. Likes, comments, shares. People we hadn't seen in years, commenting about how wonderful it looked, how happy we seemed. I ignored my phone for a while, too busy enjoying the actual party. People started leaving around 7, each one hugging us and thanking us profusely. Amber had tears in her eyes. "This was exactly what Jake and I needed," she said. "We've been so homesick. You made us feel like family." Jake shook my hand firmly. "Seriously, thank you. Best Christmas we've had in years." Helen was the last to leave. She held both of Carol's hands. "You saved me today," she said quietly. "I didn't think I could get through Christmas without Tom, but you gave me hope. Thank you." After everyone left, Carol and I collapsed on the couch, exhausted and happy. The house was a mess, dishes piled everywhere, wrapping paper scattered across the floor. And it was perfect. That's when I picked up my phone to check the time. The screen lit up with notifications, lots of them, too many. I frowned and unlocked it. 69 missed calls from Brandon. I stared at the number in disbelief. 69. Below that, 23 text messages, all from the last 4 hours. Carol noticed my expression. "What's wrong?" I showed her the screen. Her eyes went wide. 69 calls. I opened the text messages and started reading them out loud. "Dad, please pick up. I saw your pictures. We need to talk. Why aren't you answering? Dad, I'm sorry. Please call me back. I made a mistake. Stephanie is upset too." The messages got more frantic toward the end. The last one sent 10 minutes ago. "Dad, I'm coming over tomorrow morning. Please be home." I set the phone down. My hands were shaking. Carol stared at me, and I stared back. "He saw the pictures," she said softly. "He saw that we were happy without him," I said. We sat there in swoons processing. Part of me felt vindicated. He'd pushed us away, and we'd proven we didn't need him to have a good life. But another part of me, the father part, felt sad. My son had missed this. He'd missed seeing how many people cared about us, how much love was in this house. He'd chosen Stephanie's parents and their judgment over this warmth, this community. "What are you going to do?" Carol asked. "I don't know yet," I said honestly. "But I'm not going to rush. He made us wait. He can wait too." We cleaned up in silence, both lost in our thoughts. I kept glancing at my phone, watching as more texts came in. Brandon was panicking. Good. Let him feel a fraction of what he'd put us through. That night, as we got ready for bed, Carol asked again, "Are you going to talk to him?" "Eventually," I said, "but on my terms, not his." I meant it. For weeks I'd let Brandon control everything. Control whether we were happy, whether we felt loved, whether we had a good Christmas. No more. From now on, I was in charge of my own life, and if my son wanted to be part of it, he was going to have to earn it. I slept better than I had in weeks. When I woke up the next morning, it was almost 8. Carol was already up, sitting in the kitchen with her coffee, looking at her phone. "He's still texting," she said when I came downstairs. I poured myself coffee and finally opened Brandon's messages. There were more from overnight, and reading them felt like watching someone unravel. "Dad, I know you're mad, but please talk to me. I can't sleep. I keep thinking about your party. Everyone looked so happy. Why didn't you tell me you were doing this?" That last one made me angry. Why didn't I tell him? Because he'd made it clear we weren't wanted. Because he'd shut the door on us. He didn't get to act betrayed now. At 8:15 there was a knock at the door. Carol and I looked at each other. We both knew who it was. I opened the door. Brandon stood there, and he looked terrible. His hair was messy, he had dark circles under his eyes, and his clothes looked slept in. "Dad," he said, his voice cracking. "Can I come in?" I stepped aside without a word. He walked in, slowly looking around at the decorations, the remnants of the party. A few dirty plates still on the coffee table. A wine glass someone had left behind. Evidence of the celebration he'd missed. He sat on the couch. Carol came in from the kitchen and sat next to me in the armchair across from him. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable. Finally, Brandon spoke. "I saw your pictures. You had a party." "Yes," I said. My voice was level calm. I wasn't going to make this easy for him. "It looked amazing." He stared at his hands. "Everyone looked so happy." "They were," Carol said quietly. "We all were. I didn't know you were planning this." He looked up at us, and his eyes were red. "You didn't tell me. You made it clear you didn't want us for Christmas," I said. "What we did with our day wasn't your concern." He flinched like I'd slapped him. "Dad, I know. I know what I said was wrong. That's why I'm here." "What happened, Brandon?" Carol's voice was gentle but firm. "Why the sudden change of heart?" He took a shaky breath. "Yesterday was awful. Stephanie's parents came, and from the moment they walked in, they criticized everything. The house was too small, the food wasn't fancy enough, the way we were raising the kids wasn't right. Stephanie was stressed trying to please them, and I was stressed trying to keep everything together. The kids were crying because the whole vibe was tense." He paused, wiping his eyes. "And then Stephanie showed me your Facebook pictures. She was upset that you were having this big party and hadn't invited us. I told her we'd said we didn't want you there. She said that was different, that you should have begged us to come anyway." I felt anger rise in my chest, but I kept my face neutral. "So you're here because Stephanie's mad?" "No." He looked up sharply. "I'm here because I saw those pictures and realized what I'd done. I saw you and Mom smiling, surrounded by people who love you. I saw that you didn't fall apart without me. And it hit me like a punch to the gut. I'd thrown away the best thing in my life for what? For a miserable Christmas with people who don't even respect me." Tears started falling down his face. "I chose Stephanie's parents over you. I let her convince me that you weren't important enough to include. And when I saw you happy without me, I realized I'd made the biggest mistake of my life." The room was quiet except for Brandon's crying. Part of me wanted to reach out to comfort my son, like I'd done his whole life. But another part of me held back. He'd hurt us, deeply. And one apology, one moment of regret didn't erase that. "Brandon," I said carefully, "I'm glad you see that you made a mistake. But you need to understand something. You didn't just hurt our feelings. You made us feel worthless. Like 32 years of love and sacrifice meant nothing." "I know," he sobbed. "I know, and I'm so sorry." "Sorry isn't enough," Carol said, her voice shaking. "You're our son, our only child. We've given you everything we had, and you pushed us away like we were nothing." "I was wrong." Brandon stood up, pacing. "I was so wrong. I let Stephanie control me. I let her make me think that her way, her family, her standards were more important than you. But they're not. They never were." I stood up, too, facing him. "If you want us in your life, things have to change. You can't keep letting Stephanie dictate our relationship. You can't keep choosing her comfort over our connection." "I know. I'll talk to her. I'll make it right." "And if she can't accept that?" Carol asked. "If she still doesn't want us around?" Brandon looked at both of us, and for the first time I saw real determination in his eyes. "Then she'll have to learn, because I'm not losing you again. I can't." I felt my resolve cracking. This was my son, my boy, the kid I'd taught to ride a bike, to throw a baseball, to be a good man. He'd screwed up badly, but he was here. He was trying. I stepped forward and pulled him into a hug. He collapsed against me, crying like he hadn't since he was a child. "I'm sorry, Dad. I'm so sorry." Carol joined us, and the three of us stood there, holding each other. It wasn't a perfect resolution. There would be more conversations, more work to rebuild trust. Stephanie would still be an issue. There would be boundaries to set, difficult discussions to have. But in that moment, we were family again. After a while, we sat back down. Brandon wiped his face. "Can I ask you something?" "What?" "Why did you throw the party? Was it to show me what I was missing?" I thought about how to answer. Honestly. At first, maybe a little. But it became so much more than that. We threw that party because we deserved to be happy. Because we have people in our lives who value us. Because we weren't going to let your rejection define our Christmas. Everyone looked like they loved being there, he said quietly. They did, Carol said. Amber and Jake had been feeling so lonely, being away from their families. Helen just lost her husband and was dreading the holiday. George and Patricia don't have kids and usually spend Christmas alone. We gave them something and they gave us something back. That's what community is. Brandon nodded slowly. I want that. I want us to be part of that. Then you have to mean it, I said firmly. You have to stand up to Stephanie. You have to make us a priority, not an afterthought. You have to teach your kids that family is more than just the people who live in fancy houses and take expensive vacations. I will, he promised. I swear I will. We talked for another hour, laying groundwork for the future. Brandon would talk to Stephanie about boundaries. They would start coming to visit more regularly, not just when it was convenient. We would be included in the kids' lives, not kept at arm's length. It wouldn't be instant, but it was a start. Before he left, Brandon hugged us both again. I love you, he said. I'm going to make this right. After he drove away, Carol and I sat on the couch, exhausted. Do you think he'll follow through? She asked. I hope so, I said. But if he doesn't, we'll be okay. We proved that yesterday. She leaned her head on my shoulder. We did, didn't we? Yeah, we really did. The months after that Christmas brought change slow but real. Brandon called us a few days later to tell us he'd had a long talk with Stephanie. It hadn't gone well at first. She'd been defensive, angry that he was blaming her for the situation. But Brandon had stood his ground. For the first time in their marriage, he'd told her that his parents mattered, that they deserved respect, and that things had to change. 2 weeks into January, Stephanie called Carol directly. It was awkward at first, her voice tight and formal. Carol, I wanted to apologize for how things have been. I realize I haven't been very welcoming, and that wasn't fair to you or Lloyd. Carol, to her credit, was gracious. I appreciate you saying that, Stephanie. We just want to be part of Brandon's life and the kids' lives. I know, Stephanie said, and I want to try to make that happen. It wasn't a perfect apology. There was still tension, still moments of discomfort. But it was something. It was movement in the right direction. Brandon started bringing the kids over more often. Once a week, sometimes twice. Little Ethan would run to me when they arrived, and I'd scoop him up, making him giggle. Zoe was learning to walk, and Carol loved sitting on the floor with her, encouraging her steps. Those moments felt precious in a way they hadn't before. We'd almost lost this. We'd almost missed watching our grandchildren grow. Stephanie came too, though you could tell it took effort. She'd make polite conversation, try Carol's cooking, and complimented play with the kids in our small yard. She wasn't fully comfortable, not yet, but she was trying, and that mattered. We kept in touch with the friends from our Christmas party too. It turned out that throwing that party had created something lasting. Amber and Jake became regular visitors, stopping by for dinner once a month. We attended Helen's book club. George and I started a weekly poker game with Frank and a few other guys. Our social circle had expanded in ways we hadn't expected. One evening in March, Carol and I were cleaning up after having Brandon's family over for dinner. Stephanie had actually laughed at one of my jokes, and the whole evening had felt natural easy. "Do you think we did the right thing?" Carol asked as she dried a dish. "With the Christmas party, I mean. Sometimes I wonder if we were just being spiteful." I thought about it. Maybe at first there was some of that. But you know what? It taught me something important. It taught me that my happiness doesn't depend on whether my son includes me. It taught me that I have value, that we have value beyond just being Brandon's parents. She nodded slowly. It taught me that too. And I think it taught Brandon something as well. What's that? That we're not just going to sit around waiting for him to decide we matter. We have our own lives, our own friends, our own joy. She was right. That Christmas had been a turning point, not just in our relationship with Brandon, but in how we saw ourselves. We'd spent so many years making our son the center of our universe that we'd forgotten we were whole people on our own. The following Christmas, things were different again. Brandon and Stephanie invited us to their house, but this time Carol suggested something else. "Why don't we do what we did last year? Have a big party, invite all our friends, and you and your family come too." Brandon loved the idea. Stephanie was hesitant, but agreed. So we threw another party this time with our son, and his family included. 25 people crammed into our house, kids running everywhere, food covering every surface, laughter bouncing off the walls. I watched Brandon helping me carve the turkey, and I felt something settle in my chest. We'd made it through. We'd been broken, and we'd found a way to heal. It wasn't the same as before. It was different. But different wasn't bad. Different was sometimes better. That night, after everyone had gone home and Brandon had taken his sleepy children back to their house, Carol and I sat in our quiet living room. The tree lights twinkled, casting soft shadows. I pulled out my phone and looked at the pictures from the day. "Should I post them?" I asked with a smile. Carol laughed. "Absolutely." I selected my favorite photo, one of all of us together, 3 generations, smiling at the camera. I posted it with a simple caption, "Family, friends, and another incredible Christmas." Grateful doesn't even begin to cover it. Within minutes, comments started rolling in. People we knew, people we barely knew, all saying the same thing. "Beautiful family. Looks amazing. You're so blessed." I showed Carol my phone, and she squeezed my hand. "We are blessed, aren't we?" "Yeah," I said. "We really are. The thing is, blessings don't always look the way you expect. Sometimes they come wrapped in rejection and pain. Sometimes you have to lose something to realize what you actually have. That Christmas when Brandon said he didn't want us, I thought my world was ending. Instead, it was transforming. I learned that you teach people how to treat you. I learned that choosing joy, even when it feels impossible, is an act of courage. I learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about showing up, about respect, about making space for each other in the messy, complicated business of living. Most importantly, I learned that happiness is a choice. Every single day, you choose whether to sit in your pain or to stand up and create something beautiful despite it. Carol and I chose to stand. We chose to celebrate. We chose each other, and we chose the community around us. And you know what? That choice changed everything. So let me ask you this, and I really want to hear from you in the comments. Have you ever had to set boundaries with family? Have you ever had to choose your own happiness over someone else's expectations? How did it turn out? Drop your story below. And if this resonated with you, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share this with someone who needs to hear it. Because the truth is, we all need to be reminded sometimes that we're worthy of joy, that we're allowed to celebrate, and that the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's living well. Thank you for listening to my story. I hope your holidays are filled with people who truly see you and value you. And if they're not, I hope you have the courage to create your own celebration, just like Carol and I did. Merry Christmas. Happy holidays. And remember, you are enough exactly as you are.